Hi, everybody. Welcome to our last minute college application advice session. So I'm Tashin, the host, and I'm featuring Richard to answer any of your questions about college applications leading up to regular decision deadlines. So I'm going to start off by just going over a brief agenda of what today will look like. So first, right now, obviously, is the introduction to the session. Then I'll be going through the questions that were submitted in our registration link. So starting off with questions specifically about the current application season. Then we had a few questions about alternative paths, and then the questions about from students who are earlier on in the process. And then finally, we'll leave it up to an audience Q&A. So feel free to send in any questions throughout the session in the live chat. We do have an incoming NYU student in the chat, Aditi, who is active in our server and is also going to be answering any questions in the chat, but we'll also answer questions live in the end for Richard as well. And for those of you who don't know, Richard is currently a junior at Harvard studying computer science and physics, and he is also very actively engaged in research. He is an active mentor in our EduVisa server and is going to be answering your questions today during our session. So to start off the questions, so the first question that we have here is asking Richard about what's your personal journey applying to colleges and what encouraged you to select Harvard?
Great, yeah, thanks for the introduction. And my personal journey. So I guess, yeah, I guess I'm a bit farther removed from the admissions process now. I'm currently a junior, so I applied like 4 years ago. And yeah, I guess for me, I applied pretty broadly to like fairly selective schools. Applied to like maybe 10 reaches out of like 14 or 15 applications. And yeah, I don't know if I really have so much of a journey. So I applied, my first choice when I was a senior was MIT. So I applied early. I also applied early to U Chicago, just because I read online that basically it's really hard to get into U Chicago regular. Little did I know, it's also really hard to get into EA. Because they take a lot of kids through early decision. So I applied early to those two schools. I got deferred and then eventually rejected from both. And then when I got deferred, which I guess maybe this is a relevant consideration for some of you guys now, when I got deferred, I kind of, had had a little bit of panic because I was kind of concerned that like, maybe something is wrong with my application, or my essays weren't good enough, or something like that, which I've also seen a lot of recently. Happens every year when people get deferred. So I applied to like more schools than I was originally planning to apply to regular. So of course one of them was Harvard, and then I applied to like a bunch of other like pretty selective schools, and I ended up writing like most of the essays over winter break, basically. So like the last 2 weeks of December, and because before that I was kind of maybe had too big of an ego, kind of, and I was kind of feeling I would get in early, but so I kind of procrastinated the essays, and so I wrote a lot of the word count over winter break, and to be honest, the essays probably were not as polished as they should be, but I had a few essays that retrospectively I think were stronger than others maybe, and yeah, so I guess regular decision rolls around, and I get into I guess probably around half the schools that I applied to as reaches, which is like very solid, and yeah, I guess the rest is kind of history question mark. So in terms of why I chose Harvard, yeah, okay, so I think for me the biggest reason is money, right? Harvard gave me more money than most other schools. Not at first, I had to appeal the aid, but but after that, they overmatched my other offers, and so there's always money, but I think beyond money, I feel like Harvard, like for me, I came in very undecided. So like I was also one of the schools I was considering was Caltech, and I think for me, kind of the decision I made was basically that I'm very undecided in terms of what I want to study. So I kind of want a smaller core. Caltech has a very large core. It's like very not just in STEM, but also has a very large like humanities core as well. So I want a smaller core, a smaller gen ed requirement, so that I have more time to explore my own interests. And I also want kind of more flexibility in terms of being able to switch majors and kind of explore and being surrounded by people that are kind of interested in all different kinds of things as a way to like explore those myself. Whereas Caltech is more narrowly focused in terms of interests and academics. So I think that's kind of the main motivation for me. Yeah. So it was a very long answer. I can speed it up for the rest of them so we can get through them and make sure everyone has a chance to ask questions.
So thank you for that. Yeah. And I think that does definitely give hope for everybody that like if I know as early action, early decision results are coming out, if the results aren't exactly what you were initially hoping for them to be, I think that this definitely gives people inspiration to not lose hope for regular decision applications. So just moving along to our next question. So what can a senior do to improve their application before the regular decision deadline? And this person was especially focusing on extracurriculars. So there's someone who doesn't have many extracurriculars, but also wants to pursue computer science. And so how can they make themselves more attractive to colleges?
If you were a senior right now, you have like 2 weeks left, right, roughly. And I think it's very hard to improve your extracurriculars at this point right now. I think the biggest thing you can do for your application now is write the best essays you can. That's kind of the last thing you have control over now, right? And I think I think there are kind of two camps on this. I think there are people that I think most people that I've talked to, like most seniors, undervalue how much essays can matter in terms of swinging a decision, right? If you have really strong, application otherwise, but really bad essays, like that alone can kind of sink your application, because it can look like you're not interested or invested in the school, or you're not, or you may, even if you're like, even if you have great extracurriculars and grades, it may kind of come off in your application that your personality is a little flat, or and at the end of the day, schools admit people rather than collections of scores. So kind of the essay is kind of your pathway to kind of communicating that. And so basically, if you can, even if you have no kind of related extracurriculars, which for one are not necessary, but even if you have no extracurriculars, if you can use your essays and kind of come off as a really really interesting kind of a really interesting person that people want to meet and hang around, then that alone, I've seen that kind of get people in alone. Right? Again, people or missions admit people rather than collections of scores and extracurriculars. So yeah, okay. I guess TLDR is write essays, focus on essays for the last kind of stretch of application season.
All right. So the next question here is, what do highly selective colleges value most?
Ooh, okay. Okay. This is I guess hard to give a like really straightforward answer to. Like, but I think really broadly they want to admit, like I said, kind of interesting people, right? Part of that is being, well, the first thing is like you have to be sufficiently academic so that like you will not literally fail out of their college, because then admitting you does no good. But beyond that, basically they're looking, again, for people that are high achieving and sufficiently interesting, if that makes sense. So, right, these kind of go in parallel. or they're kind of orthogonal to one another, I think. But in terms of achievement, right? They want to know that you will come to the school, you will use the best of use the resources that they're providing you to the best of to their full kind of advantage, and they want to know that after graduation you have like the ambition and you have the kind of the drive to go on and use your education and continue to do things in the world. But they also, and the second thing is that they want to admit interesting people, namely that when you're actually on campus, you will kind of make campus livelier, right? You will participate in events, you have like interesting conversations with your classmates and engage them and things like that. And yeah, and people like the kind of everyone, every school uses the kind of term holistic admissions, right? And I think this like I really do think it's kind of the best way to describe like what happens, right? Like nothing in and of itself is necessary or sufficient to get you into a really selective school. It really is like the whole package.
Yeah, so I think just really keeping in mind that there isn't any one single factor that selective colleges are looking for, but like the whole package, as you emphasized. All right, and so conveniently enough, in line to your answer to the previous question, we got a bunch of questions asking about essays. And so the first question here on essays is, any suggestions for students who are experiencing writer's block or how to stay sane in the next few weeks as people are cramming in, I'm sure, a bunch of supplements for schools?
Yeah. Writer's block. Okay. Writer's block is tough. If you were dealing with a lot of essays, one thing that helped me was just kind of juggling between them. So like going back and forth between different essays. If you get stuck on one, just try to work on another for a while, and just kind of passively let the block kind of like fade as you kind of juggle other ideas. Another thing you could do is there's an app that I thought was useful. I think it's called the Most Dangerous Writing Game. Basically, the way it works is like you have to, if it's like a notepad, it's like an online notepad thing. And if you type into it, and if you stop typing for more than like 5 or 10 seconds, it deletes everything. So it kind of forces you to keep writing. I thought that was kind of cute. It's a little gimmicky, but I think it does work. At least it worked for me. Yeah, in terms of how to stay sane, okay, I'm going to interpret sane in two ways. I think there's sane in terms of being able to actually evaluate your own essays and like read your own writing without kind of getting lost, right? And kind of like getting a sense for what is good, what is bad. I think there's sane in terms of like just stress management. So for the first one, I think what you want is ideally to find other people in the similar situation to you that have like a lot of essays and kind of a lot of maybe a lot of deadlines coming up, and use them as like kind of grounding for your own essays. So like, get feedback from them, get like peer review, and you may have to reciprocate the same, to get that. And that will help you kind of make sure that you're not going like totally crazy in terms of what is a good essay and what is not a good essay. Okay, so in terms of stress management, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this, because when I was doing this myself, I got pretty stressed, especially during these last, kind of 2 weeks after early decisions, but before regular. Maybe so something that I found helpful was kind of organizing and maintaining like basically like a list of terms of like what needs to be done, what you have done, and kind of tracking your progress, and kind of organizing out everything, and keeping things basically keeping things visual, making sure that you have a good idea of like what is left, so that and yeah, for me that was helpful. But I know for some people, if they do that makes them like kind of more paranoid about like, oh, I have so many things to do, and how am I going to meet, like, am I going to do all these things before like the deadline and things like that. Yeah, other than that, I also really recommend like not put it like the deadlines are approaching, but I think it's really important not to put yourself in like a hole of only doing this for the next 2 weeks, because I think that you will go kind of crazy from that. So I think it's important to schedule breaks, schedule time like with other people, and schedule kind of time to de-stress and kind of really reset between sessions, like every few hours. Like short term you will feel like that's not productive because you're not actually working on essays, but long term, and the next 2 weeks are really is somewhat of a long term rather than it's even if it's only 2 weeks, it's still a marathon at this point. So for that, it's important to kind of make sure you're kind of invested in the long haul.
For sure. So the next question that we have here is, what should one care about the most when revising or reviewing or selecting an essay?
What should you care about the most? I think the most important thing is to ask yourself what the emissions people are getting out of your essay. Like in terms of like, what does it actually tell them about you as a person, as an applicant? Like I think people stress about little things that don't really matter, so like syntax and like kind of particular phrasing and things like that. I think those at the end of the day are not that relevant. What does matter is what the essay actually conveys about you in terms of, at a like a higher level, big picture. Does it convey that you are what does it say about your personality, what you'll be like on campus, what you're going to do on campus, what you want to do with the resources that are given school and things like that. I think that is like underrated when people are reviewing essays, their own or otherwise.
Great. So the next question here is, how can I improve my storytelling for essays? And I guess more broadly, how can a person create a strong essay?
This is very hard if you are currently a senior to work on storytelling. What I would say is like storytelling is definitely a skill, like narrative writing in general. And it is very hard to improve in the course of 2 weeks. Yeah, if the person asking this, or there are people like listening that are like juniors, what you can do is you can start practicing now. You don't write essays, don't write like college essays. I think that's a bad idea. But what you can do is start writing about your own life. Start like keeping it like a daily or weekly journal and kind of writing down thoughts and kind of just kind of writing about your day and kind of your goals and things like that, and just practice writing down what's in your head, and writing that in a way that is convincing, in a way that's kind of compelling for the reader. If you are a senior and you are kind of struggling with this, I I think the best thing you can do is kind of step back and again kind of go back to this big picture idea of what it is that you want to convey, in terms of what the essay should say about you, rather than kind of these smaller details. I think storytelling is kind of like it's like a nice cherry on top, right? It's a nice like if you can fit this like nice kind of cute narrative arc in your story, that's nice, but it's not necessary, right? The most important thing is that what the essay tells about you. So I would go back and focus on this kind of first thing, and if you have time to like try to sneak or like a narrative, then kind of come back for that, and then you can kind of maybe workshop things with hopefully like an English teacher or things like that, in terms of like what works well is, and in terms of narrative. But I would not stress too much about this now if you are a senior, and just trying to like shove that in. Much more important to figure out the big picture of your essay.
Absolutely agree with that. So the next two questions I kind of just want to group together since I think they're shorter. So the first one is asking about advice on like how to conclude an essay, and another one asking about if a person should include a title to their essays.
Title is not necessary. That one's easy to answer. Title is not necessary. You can include one. I don't think it really. If you think the essay benefits from having an essay, like in terms of like priming the reader for what's coming, then sure, but not necessary. How should you conclude your essay? Usually people do like a paragraph that basically kind of summarizes whatever like the essay is saying, or like if it's like a story, then like it kind of drives the like it kind of wraps the whole story together. So if you have like kind of narrative, and then the last paragraph is like, from this experience, like I learned this and this, and this is how I grew as a person, and this is who I am now, or something like that. Unfortunately, there's not much really, like it's hard to give a one size fits all for this, because it really depends on like what the essay is, and what is like still left to be said, basically. But basically I would try to try not to restate too many things that are like already made clear by the essay, but try to kind of provide some new insights, and kind of maybe be more direct in the last paragraph than you have in the other earlier ones.
Definitely agree. And I think the point about minimizing repetition is also really important. And so the final question that we have here about essays from registration is, what can a person do to make their essays more vulnerable?
Oh, that is a good question. Okay, on the server, there is there's a document posted by Better College Apps LLC is the username. It's called an introspection sheet. If you search for that, it should come up. Basically it's like a document, and that has like I think it's like 100 questions, and the questions are basically just kind of trying to figure out like what kind of things you value, what kind of things that you know are important to you, what kind of person you are, and things like that. And I think that's kind of, if you're totally lost, I think that's a good way to start, definitely, because it kind of forces you to ask those kinds of questions yourself. So I think in general, that's kind of the first step, right? Kind of understanding yourself and what parts of you are actually vulnerable before you can put them in an essay. And I think that like for most people is the most difficult part, is kind of figuring actually thinking about your kind of history, and who you are as a person. I think for me that was certainly a large part of the college application process, the kind of growing in terms of introspection. Once you have that, in terms of actually putting it into essays, that is also kind of tricky, right? Because a lot of things that make you vulnerable are things that are kind of sensitive and personal, right? Kind of by their very nature. So I think definitely you need to exercise tact in terms of how to insert those things into an essay. But maybe I would just keep in mind that at the end of the day, those are kind of a lot of vulnerable things about you are kind of what admissions are looking for in a lot of senses. They really at the end of the day want to get to know how you kind of tick, and how what makes what you are looking forward to, and what you are kind of all about in terms of as a person, and as kind of a student, and things like that. I know that's not very like concrete advice. It's not very actionable in terms of how you actually put that in your essays. Yeah.
I think it's great. I think values exercises definitely helped me a lot with getting going with my essays. I know for me, there was also an exercise by the college essay guide that's also a values exercise that's also useful to check out. But I also just want to warn people not to get too bogged down in the brainstorming process, because I think that's where I personally ended up losing a lot of time. But I do think that's a great place to start with becoming more vulnerable in your essays. So moving on to other questions that are submitted that aren't necessarily about essays in particular. So a few questions were specific about your Harvard application. So what accomplishments and activities did you list in your Harvard application?
I have to think about this. I don't remember.
Sure, I think we can come back to this if you.
Okay. I don't think about my application much anymore. But
No,
how many
understandable.
B's do you have to have for your chance? Oh, sorry, that's your kind of
No,
silly
go
job,
ahead,
huh?
go ahead. Yeah, so how many B's do you have to get to your chances at Harvard?
I don't know if there's a strict like number. I mean, like Okay, I mean, all else equal, right? It's better to have 0 Bs than like any Bs, but like realistically, 1, 2, 3, 4 Bs are really not that big a deal. Like they don't really hurt your odds in any like quantifiable sense. Um, so I mean the heuristic cutoff that people use is like 3.8 unweighed in terms of like overall GPA, like all 4 years of high school. If you have like a bad like freshman or even sophomore year, getting stronger grades later helps, right? So if you have more Bs early, that's better than more Bs later. But yeah, I think it's really hard to put a strict number on this.
Completely agree. So the next question is, what could a person do if they don't get accepted for any scholarships?
Oh, okay. Financial aid stuff is always tough. Yeah, if you don't get any scholarships and you have nowhere that's affordable to go in terms of college, if you're in the US, I would strongly consider like a 2-year institution like the community college. If that is not an option, like for example, you're not in the US, I would not take any of your offers that you have, right? It's better not to go to school and than to go to school for like a ridiculous amount of debt. You can always reapply next year. But once you have debt, right, you have like, and you enroll and you do a year, and you collect debt, then you can't get out of that. So just be very, very cautious. If you need scholarships and you don't get any, I would just not go to school, to be honest. It's better to put yourself in a position where you can reapply and kind of strengthen your application and try again than it is to take on the debt now. Yeah, be very careful with that.
Awesome. So the next question here is if you have any suggestions for students who got deferred or waitlisted in early decision, early action. And here I also just want to pull in a question that was asked in the chat about if people were deferred or denied an early decision, would you suggest them to aim for IVs as an alternative in regular decision?
Okay. Okay, so I guess the most important thing, which I think a lot of people don't know about, is you should write a letter of continuing interest, Loki, some people call it. There are good guides on this online. If you Google like letter of continued interest deferral or something, that is the biggest thing. A lot of schools will not consider you if like for a regular decision, essentially, if you don't do this, even though it's not implicitly or it's not explicitly said anywhere. So that is the most important thing. Basically, what it is you write like a short, really short, at like 300 words or something. You kind of say that you're still interested in the school, and you give any updates in terms of like your application between early and regular. If you win an award, or you start a new extracurricular, or you got like a promotion at work or something like that, all that can go in there. You want to send this sometime in January or early February. Worry about regular applications now, and then do this after all your regular applications are in. But this is like extremely important. I should say there are some schools that explicitly ask you not to do this. So you should make sure check for that first. But most schools will want to see one, even if they don't say it explicitly. And oftentimes they will not seriously consider application for regular if you don't do this. If you got deferred early, should you still shoot for IVs? I'm maybe like survivorship bias, because that's like pretty much what happened to me, right? I got deferred early, and then I applied for IVs and got in. Yeah, I think maybe like kind of backing up like bigger picture of it. Admission decisions are very random. Like there are people that get into schools that are more selective than others, that they get rejected from. There people, like I have a friend who got a likely at Harvard, and then got rejected like pretty much like at most other selective schools, like just across the board. Admissions are very random. If you think you're a competitive applicant and you want to go to these schools, I would not let your early decision or early action results influence that too much. Just keep putting applications in, keep shooting your shot, because otherwise if you don't go for the applications, right, you definitely cannot get in. And I think the biggest thing is not to let your early decisions color your own kind of your own confidence too much. If you get like I said, they're very random. If you get deferred or rejected, that doesn't really translate all too much to other schools, right? Every application is a new chance. Every application is kind of a new reader and kind of different things they're looking for, and so on. So I guess basically, I definitely, if those are the kinds of schools you want to go to, and they're right for your goals, then yeah, absolutely, I wouldn't let really deter you.
And I do just also want to say to the people watching the live stream that we are seeing your questions in the chat, obviously, so keep sending in the questions. We're almost done with the registration questions, and then we'll focus in on the Q&A section. So the last question on this particular slide is a person asking if they should show their imperfections in their application. For example, times where they failed, been unproductive, etc.
Okay, so I think yes, but you have to be careful about this. So there's like a limit to this, right? So imperfections are really good in terms of like humanizing you and kind of like, showing that you're not just like a collection of accomplishments, right? Again, colleges admit people and kind of and that includes everything, including imperfections. But the other thing is that you don't want them to be like, if you mention an imperfection, you generally want to show some kind of growth from that, and kind of improving self-improvement, right? At the end of the day, your college app should show you in a positive light, and imperfections can help frame that, right? Because again, they're kind of opportunities for kind of growth and learning and things like that. So I think they're a great kind of great way to do that, and I think it is. Like it helps make your application more kind of genuine if you have those kinds of things in your application. Yeah, but again, okay, I feel like I just repeated myself now. But again, I would not I wouldn't talk about imperfections like just to have imperfections in your application, right? That just makes you look bad. but they can be useful in terms of and I think it's important to have some.
And I think just like being strategic, and I think the point you mentioned about like if you are going to talk about imperfections, then focusing on like what you learned from it and how you grow, I think that's really key. So the next two sets of questions are about people asking for alternative paths. So the first question is about a student in a gap year, and the second one is about transferring from a community college. So any thoughts about reapplications during a gap year and anything a person should include differently or emphasize more?
Yeah, I think if you're on a gap year, the application is basically the same. I would not do much differently. If you are like taking one gap year, or even if you take two gap years, you could emphasize more like what you learn on the gap year, or your gap years. If you apply just after one gap year or during your one gap year, you haven't had much time to actually do things that are not school yet, right? It's just been one summer and maybe half a semester. Of course, you should emphasize the things in your gap year a little bit more. The most recent things always matter the most for applications. But other than that, I would not really construct the app too differently, except for again, recency bias.
Thank you for that answer. And I also do just want to mention here for our audience that we did actually have a session in the past it was in our international applications panel where we featured Natasha, who is on a gap year. So I think that if any of you want more insight on a gap year, definitely check out that on our YouTube channel to get some more insight on the experience of someone in a gap year. And so the next question on this set is about if you start by going to a community college and then try to transfer to a four-year institution, are there good chances of getting into an Ivy League?
I think it depends a lot on the school. Most Ivies do not accept that many transfers. Like Harvard, for example, accepts like on average 12 transfers total, compared to like 1,600 first-year students. Most transfers like that get accepted are community college students. So that's in your favor. And there are some exceptions, like Cornell takes a lot of community college students relative to other Ivies. So I guess I would hesitate to say that you have good chances, just because these schools, like even for like first year admission, are where they accept tons of kids, are really really selective anyway. So I would really hesitate to say anyone has good chances. And beyond that, I think it's important to be maybe kind of mindful of the fact that these schools do not accept many people, especially in transfers, like where they take most Ivies take like 10 transfers a year on that order. But you can definitely go to an excellent school, certainly. You just have to be mindful of which ones accept more transfers, like Cornell. USC takes a lot of transfers, and so on. So long as you're mindful of that, I think you do have like, you can be like really competitive, and you can still go to like a really selective school if that's what you're looking for.
So thank you so much for that. I am just going to move on from the slide for the interest of time. So we got a few questions from people who I believe were earlier on in the process. So shout out to the juniors and other underclassmen watching this. So the first question is on like how you studied for the SAT and ACTs and AP exams. I know it's been a while.
Sorry, no. Yeah, I guess I'm trying to think of what I did. Yeah, so I guess for me, I think, okay, so I guess we'll maybe break this down. I took both the SAT and the ACT. I studied mostly for the SAT, but I took the ACT first, and I did well enough on the ACT that I didn't want to take the SAT. So in terms of studying, I think the best thing you can do is like real practice exams. I would space out your real practice exams. Each, like the SAT has 10 official ones or something like that, and the ACT has similar number maybe. So those are your most valuable resource. Space them out so you don't use them up all at once. Hopefully you don't need all 10. I think if you do, you might be, you're probably not studying efficiently enough in terms of usage of real exams. And so basically what I would do is take one as a diagnostic, figure out where you're weak, look at specifically those areas. So if it's math, you can kind of like, I would make like a summary of like, I missed, so many algebra questions or so many trigonometry questions. Review specifically those concepts for 1 or 2 weeks, and then take another exam and kind of see how you're improving in those areas, right? If you're not improving, then you need to work on the way you're studying those concepts and the way you're practicing those kinds of questions between the exams, right? And the official exams should really just act as benchmarks in terms of where you are in your progress, but they're useful. They're very useful in that sense. If you have a long horizon, like you're, I guess, currently a junior, I would, and you want to study kind of relatively quickly, like you're aiming for like March SATs or something, I would basically do a real exam every 1 or 2 weeks. And then in between is the most important time, is this kind of diagnostic, figuring out what you're missing, why you're missing it. It's very important. And then correct those, the things that you're missing. I think that is the general strategy. I'm happy to talk more about specifics, maybe like offline, not really offline, but like on Discord or something. You can ping me, and I will kind of try to give more specific advice towards that. But at a high level, that's what I would do. AP exams I think are trickier because usually the content is more specific. There are less general resources, but you can do this. You can do a similar thing where you can use the official exams or past exams as kind of benchmarks. But I think kind of the main thing is kind of understanding the exam itself. It depends a little between like history and like science APs or like math APs, but I think one way to kind of get easy bump in scores is kind of understanding the rubric, like especially for something like DBQs for history, like kind of understanding the rubric and why you get points, and kind of structuring the way you approach the question towards those. So if you know that you have to like include a certain kind of analysis, right, for DBQ, then kind of make sure when you are preparing to write the essay in your little kind of prep session beforehand, when you're reading all the documents, right, then you actually make sure that you're considering those and things like that. I know again, I know that's kind of a vague answer to question that you could spend like a whole hour talking about, but again, maybe kind of we can continue this offline over text or something. Yeah.
Really agree. So just to throw in the next question on the slide. So a person asked about what aspects one person should keep in mind when applying besides test scores. So what other factors strengthen an application besides exams?
Yeah, this is a very broad question. Basically, there are there's scores, your grades, your transcript. That's probably the single most important thing. If I had to pick one, there are extracurriculars and awards. So things that you do outside of school, clubs, volunteering, if you work a job, if you have family responsibilities like taking care of a sibling, all of those count. And then there's essays, which are kind of more free flowing and kind of free, more open to being whatever you kind of want them to be. If you're early in the process, don't think about essays. Make sure you're getting good grades, and make sure you're getting make sure you're getting involved in things outside of your outside of just school. Those are kind of the things I would focus on. The other thing that the other part of the application is things that you don't really have control over. So things like teacher recommendations, except if you're early, you do have control over them somewhat, right? You can kind of be more active in class. You can be, well, sounds really stupid, but you should be a better person. What I mean by that is recommendations are also reflections of your, not just your academic ability, right? They're also importantly reflections of your personality, your character. And colleges really care about having people that are kind, people that are kind of generous with their time. They work well with their peers, things like that. If that is not you, if you think you are a bad person, which I guess most people don't, but if you kind of are aware that you maybe don't get along the best with people and things like that, then you can work on that, those aspects of yourself. You can work on being kind of more present in the classroom and being more maybe more friendly or things like that, getting to know your teacher better, and also importantly kind of your interactions with your classmates and things like that. Those are kind of things about yourself and the way you kind of carry yourself day to day that you can still work on. But I think I think people do massively underrate this in the application, right? In terms of character traits and personality. Schools very much do not want to admit bad people that don't get along well with others and people that can't communicate well and things like that. So I get kind of a long rambling answer. But.
No, I think that's great. I think you highlighted a lot of key elements, and I also do just want to mention that we have another session in our YouTube channel where we did an introduction to the college admissions process. So for juniors and underclassmen who are interested in a peek of what the college admissions journey is like for the senior year, you can also find that video on our YouTube channel, obviously after you watch this one. And so that ends it for our registration questions. So we have been getting a lot of questions in the chat, so I did just want to move on to that. Quote from Richard, be a better person. All right, so the first question I want to get to from our Q&A, just since we're already on the topic, one person asked about what you think juniors should be doing right now to get into a selective college.
Great. Yeah, okay, that's a good question. Okay, so again, the most important thing you should do now is make sure you're getting good grades. Junior grades are the most important grades when you apply to college because they don't have senior year grades, and so junior year are the most recent. So you should be getting nearly straight A's, a few A minuses. A minuses basically don't matter. I wouldn't worry about A minuses. If you're getting a few B's, do your best to kind of a B or two is fine. Like it won't sink your application by any means, but I would try to go as close to 4.0 as you can while like kind of maintaining your sanity, basically. And of course, while spending time on other things. The biggest thing I think you can do though is, outside of grades is kind of, making sure you're like exploring your interests in a way that kind of gets you involved in things outside of academics, right? So we're, basically this is the extracurricular section, because there's nothing else you can, well, it's hard to work on other things now, right? There's there's exams like test scores, but you can always apply test optional, but you definitely need to be involved in things outside of the, well, need is also a strong word, but I think that's kind of the what makes a lot of people's applications compelling, is kind of what they do outside the classroom, and kind of using that as a way to explore things that they're interested in, and kind of getting involved in the community, or getting involved in kind of some kind of broader thing outside of just school. So it could be hard to pick like activities that you enjoy, or find ones that are good fits for you. I think it really comes down to like what things you're interested in, and what things you kind of want to do, long term, and things that you kind of find enjoyable like now. And I finding a good balance of those. So I think, like, personally, I think the best kind of things you can do are basically things that like kind of involve what you think your future career will be, right? So if you're thinking about like going into, like, if you want to be like a software engineer, you want to work in tech, and that hopefully you're also interested in, right, in programming for fun, and kind of building apps and things like that, because that's kind of what you're going towards, and you kind of want to make the intersection of those, right? Things that are, so hopefully those are things that are fun now for you, and also kind of help you build relevant skills for later on, even outside of like emissions aside, right? Those will be valuable skills if you want to do software. Just as an example, right? So kind of I would look towards your future interests as a way to kind of get started with those. Yeah, other than that, just grades, and if you have the chance, without kind of significantly without like a significant risk to you or your family, then then also sports in sometime in March or the summer, or early senior year. But given that like pretty much everyone is test optional, then I would not worry about that as much, especially if you can't do it without significant risk to yourself or your family, where you have to like, I heard stories of like people traveling like 300 miles to take an SAT, which I think is really stupid, but yeah.
Definitely also just like prioritizing safety with COVID and all, so please don't go extreme and put yourself at risk just to take the SAT. So the next question here is, a person is curious about what you wrote about in your personal and supplemental essays, if you can remember that far back.
I remember my Common App essay. I wrote about Wikipedia. Yeah, I wrote about like kind of like getting into like rabbit holes on Wikipedia. Like you just keep clicking links and you keep like kind of reading. So I wrote about that basically, and kind of how that. And then of course I didn't just talk about that. I also kind of tied it back to like how I like how I get kind of lost in like specific like things that I'm interested in, and kind of I like doing this kind of exploration in my own kind of world and things like that. That's the TLDR.
Nice. I mean, I've definitely been there on Wikipedia and Quora, just in a rabbit hole. And so like on the note of essays, a person is wondering that would it put them in a disadvantage if they don't talk about extracurriculars in their essays?
No, I don't think so. Like, I mean, again, extracurriculars are like one part of what you do, right? They are one aspect of a larger application. And I think I've seen strong essays that talk about extracurriculars, but I've also seen plenty of strong essays that talk about nothing extracurricular related, like just random parts of your life. I think are really can be strong starting points, right? Random parts of your life that are meaningful to you, but maybe not meaningful to other people, and kind of elaborating on those, because I think those are kind of the fact that it's meaningful to you but kind of ordinary otherwise is kind of a strong, it's a strong kind of indicator of something that's like that makes you makes you tick, right? Something that is insightful towards your personality, right? Something like yeah. So I guess I would say actually I think most of the essays I read that I think are good are not strictly extracurricular.
Yeah.
I think if you are talking only about extracurriculars without much other insight, that actually makes for a very weak essay, right? Again, the essay is about you and kind of your personality and your what you want to do and what you value. Extracurriculars are also hopefully things that like align with those, right? Hopefully you value your extracurriculars and you enjoy them and you want to do them, but it doesn't have to be those.
Definitely agree. And I think there are some cases where even like some essays are about extracurriculars are overdone. So that is just something to be mindful of. I think it really boils down to like bringing it back to you, as I think you've highlighted a lot. So we do have a few other questions of people asking about applications and like hurting or improving chances. So one person asked about if you think a person still has a chance of reapplying to colleges if they got rejected previously.
Yeah, I mean you always have a chance, right? I mean, if you apply, they will read your application and you have a chance. I guess in general comment about reapplying, I guess it's important to be mindful. Like if you like, I said earlier, you shouldn't value any one decision, but if you're applying to like maybe 20 schools and you like get rejected from 20 schools, and then try to be mindful about like what in your application is not could be improved basically. It could be that you get overwhelmingly unlucky. I have actually seen that happen, or people that I believe like had strong applications otherwise and just got like overwhelmingly unlucky and didn't get into places. That can happen, right? Because at the end of the day, it is somewhat probabilistic. You're rolling the dice. Even if you have like a strong application, you can still get rejected everywhere just because you got unlucky. That can happen, but so I guess but if you are reapplying, kind of be mindful of that. Be mindful of the fact that you want to show something like some kind of growth, right, in terms of the reapplication. Like what have you learned since you last applied? Why and even if this isn't communicated on your essay or your application directly, what compels you to reapply? Why are you taking doing all this extra work to kind of reapply? Even if these are just things you answer personally, I think they're kind of important things to consider in general. Again, even if they don't come across in the application itself.
Yeah. So we are almost at the top of the hour. So also last call for questions. I mean, I think we only have time for just a few more questions. So again, we have a few other questions about chances and stuff. So a person asked about if a bad GPA can ruin chances of getting into a prestigious college such as Harvard. And another person asked about not having the strongest GPA in their junior year, which I personally think is relatively high. They said that they're in the 96th percentile, but what are your thoughts on lower GPA in high school?
96 percentile seems fine. Top 5% is really good. Yeah, I mean, okay, in general, right? Having a like all else equal, having like a strong GPA is better, right? I mean, like it is better to apply with a 4.0 than like a 3.8, and so on. So I guess again, in that sense, it does hurt your application. But for most of you, that is like mostly out of your control at this point. Especially if you're a senior, definitely out of your control. If you're a junior, most of your GPA is solidified, or at least a good chunk of it. So I will say that like you can definitely get in with a lower GPA. That happens all the time. There's a kid at Harvard who's a freshman now. He had a 3.0 in high school. And he had he did kind of the reason he had a low GPA is because he did kind of ridiculous things outside of school, right? He wasn't that focused on school and he was doing working on other things and other projects, and admissions were basically like, okay, like, that's okay. That's someone we want on campus anyway, right? Even if they don't have the best grades. That is not most people, right? Most people do have like pretty high GPAs, like 3.8 plus. But if that's not you, you should know that you still have a chance. Although you should also know that, like, you should know that you have a chance, but that it will, it is like, it is worse than not having a strong GPA. But you definitely still are in the running. And there are certainly ways to make up for low GPAs. Right?
And I think just like the quote about like you miss 100% of the shots that you don't make. So regardless of the situation, and at the end, like you should still shoot your shot if that's the college you want to go to. So I am just going to throw in one final question because we are low on time. And so I just wanted to know if you have like any final pieces of advice for students currently applying or for other underclassmen who are applying in the future as well.
Okay, this is maybe a little cliche, but like, like I think it's easy to get caught up in admissions. Like, it's very easy. Like, there are a lot of online communities that you can kind of spend like hours and hours of your life just talking about admissions. I think the most competitive people and kind of the most compelling people in terms of applications are honestly those that don't care that much about admission, right? Because those people tend to be the ones that have the most perspective. They tend to be the most grounded, and they tend to be spending time doing things that they really like and they care about. And outside of like admissions, right? So basically, my advice is not to stress too much, and definitely do not like try to avoid obsessing over admissions. I know it's really easy to do that. I think I did that certainly a bit senior year. But I would try to do your best to avoid that. Try to kind of keep your head out of the mud with respect to that. There's a lot of advice. There's a lot of kind of talk that you can get involved in, and but I think a lot of it is not productive. And I think the people, like, again, like I said, I think the most competitive people, the most compelling people are those that kind of have a good perspective on things in terms of admissions, and like keeping in mind that where you go to school is not does not define your life. It really is just a small stepping stone. If you have kind of that ambition and the drive that kind of has put you in this place in high school to begin with, then you're going to be fine no matter where you go. And kind of keeping that in mind, and keeping that kind of staying sane in that respect. I think is kind of the most, like, the best thing you can do for yourself, not just in terms of applications, right? In terms of just staying kind of staying healthy in terms, and kind of keeping a good mindset beyond college, and kind of into into everything else in your life.
Definitely agree. So thank you so much, Richard, for all the insight that you shared. I think there was lots and lots of valuable information that you shared today. So thank you so much for that. Thank you also to everybody in the audience who joined, asked questions. Shout out to Aditi for being very responsive in the chat and answering questions. And so we'll be sending out the link to the recording in a few days. And this will be forever available on our YouTube channel. If you have any further questions, I know there were a few questions we couldn't get to, but you can always feel free to send them in our Discord server, and Richard or other college students will answer your questions there. So thank you so much, everybody.
Oh, wait, sorry, I guess Tash,
Yeah,
I can hang around for like a few more minutes. If people, maybe we should do this on Discord. I think it'd be nice to like talk to people, and kind of if you want to keep asking questions, I can hang out for maybe half an hour in the Discord as well, and just kind of take more questions, or kind of chat with people.
Sure. So I mean, yeah, I think maybe we can move over to the Discord server. Yeah. So I think we can end the live stream, but I'll see you guys in the Discord server if you guys want to continue asking questions. All right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Bye, everybody.